Hello, BookTube. I have a couple of tags I want to do today, both of which I saw on the BookTube channel An Erudite Adventure. I'll leave a link to their channel down below. And both of which I found really fascinating. I'm going to try to skew both of these tags for nonfiction in preparation for Nonfiction November, which is right upon us. And the first one I want to do is the Halloween Candy book tag, which was created by Megan's Reading Revelation. And I saw it on An Erudite Adventure, and I have to say, before we even get started, that I share the ambivalence of our hosts, our young hosts on that channel, as to the candies being picked here. But we'll get into that. Question number one is Gummy Bears, a book where the characters have to get out of a sticky situation. Here I want to choose Snow and Steel by Peter Caddick Adams. This is his history of the Battle of the Bulge, in which the German army that everyone thought was completely penned in and on the verge of surrender decided on a massive winter breakthrough of the Allied lines to wreak as much havoc as they could, to take as many villages and especially gas depots as they could, and maybe even to make it to the nearest big river. Totally insane. It was a totally insane thing to do. But they did it anyway and had some very perilous moments of success in the limited extent that this was ever going to be successful. It was successful in a lot of ways, and a lot of the Allied soldiers who were caught, in some cases, quite literally napping, found themselves surrounded, found themselves surrendering, found themselves slaughtered, found themselves fighting for their lives. So I'd call that a sticky situation. This is the best modern history of the Battle of the Bulge that I've read. So it came to mind for this tag and also for Nonfiction November. Then prompt number two is Milky Way Midnight, a book that kept you up reading through the night. Here, questions like this are always going to be a bit of a trouble for me because I read through the night anyway. There isn't really an answer here. Even bad books will keep me up reading at night because I'm not like the rest of you, visibly yearning to go unconscious and drool on your pillows. I've heard so many people say, and I've seen so many people say on social media, is 8:30 too early to go to bed? I'm not like that, so I read all night anyway, so this question doesn't really apply. So we move on to question number three. Again, the candy prompts here are not only weird, but repulsive. This next one is Caramel Apple Lollipops. Your favorite middle grade or children's book. And for middle grade, I want to pick not book one, but book two in the Bartimaeus trilogy by Jonathan Stroud. This is the Golem'S Eye. I don't quite know why. Something about this book landed with me a lot more effectively than the first book did. I don't think it's just because in the gap between the first book and the second book, our hero becomes a teenage super hottie. I don't think it's that, although Bartimaeus notices it. I don't think it's that. I think it's just the simpler answer, which is that the author is getting better at doing his job. The Golem's Eye I liked a lot better than the first book in the series. So I don't know about favorite, but as a favorite, sure, that for middle grade, yes. And then for a kids book, I'll give it another favorite. I've mentioned it on this channel many, many times. It's Barn Dance by Bill Martin with beautiful art by John Archambault, about a skinny kid who hears music coming from the barn at night and goes to investigate and encounters a whole new world. I love this book so much. I love how infinitely read out loudable it is. I love how full of magic it is, so I definitely, it might actually be one of my favorites. Then we can move on to prompt number four, which is Reese's Pieces, a book about that is short but packs a punch. I picked on poetry. I couldn't do nonfiction for the YA and middle grade, but for everything else, I picked On Poetry by Glenn Maxwell. This came out probably 10 years ago and really surprised me with how good it was, with how powerful it is, how insightful. This is one of those books I always talk about on this channel that has something thought-provokingly quote-worthy on every page, even though there's quite a bit of it on which I think the author and I would very much disagree. doesn't really matter. It didn't really matter for me when reading it, and it's not long. It's a tiny thing. I almost have it within reach to show you. Do I? No, I don't. But we've seen it on this channel many times. It's a short thing and very much worth your time if you're into poetry. if you're interested in thinking about it or having someone else do some megawatt thinking about it. Then let's see here. Number 5 is Milk Duds, a book that disappointed you. And I can't tell here whether or not Megan's reading revelation made this prompt with Milk Duds because Milk Duds aren't her favorite candy, or because dud is a colloquial word for a failure and it's right there in the name of the candy. I don't know, one way or the other. I can certainly list a lot of disappointments this year. That's a lot of disappointments. But one is one that I saw coming. I've mentioned it on this channel a few times. I saw it coming a long way off. I still held out hope. But no, no, it's this. And There Was Light. John Meacham's new book on Abraham Lincoln, which is devoid of original research, which would at least have validated something about its existence, but it's also devoid of any kind of historical reading. It is not history if you go into a subject already loving it. If you go into a subject saying that this subject can do no wrong, if you go into a subject teary-eyed and old man in his study with a glass of bourbon sentimental, then what you're going to produce is just the flip side of old man sitting in his study with a glass of bourbon and being angry. So, but again, doing nothing in the way of critical thought, of critical evaluation of sources, which means that this book, when I was reading it, I could not escape a mental comparison with the books of Bill O'Reilly. It has a lot more in common with them than it does with any serious work on Abraham Lincoln, which is a shame, and I'm hoping not a bellwether. I'm really hoping that this does not indicate that John Meacham is just going to rest in this position for the rest of his writing career. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. Then prompt number 6 is Snickers, a book that you devoured. And here I don't have a cover for you because it's not a book that exists yet. It's a book that I hope will find a publisher. I'm hoping that it will exist in at least a small academic press. It's a heavily annotated edition of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. It's a long introduction that needs some work and tons of annotations and appendices and whatnot. An amazing edition of the play, my own favorite Shakespeare play. If it can find a publisher, if it can be worked into perfect shape and find a publisher. That is the most recent book that I just devoured. I fell on it and could not look away from it until I was done and had annotated it 6 ways from Sunday. But I don't have a picture to show you. Hopefully someday I will be able to show that to you. And then prompt number 7 is Peppermint Patties, a book that is refreshing. Our young hosts on An Erudite Adventure are only meh. They're only so-so about Peppermint Patties. They say, well, if there's some there, I guess I'll have some. I don't understand this at all. Peppermint Patties are, of course, the food of the gods. The only problem that I've ever had with them on Halloween or any other time is when someone says, would you like some Peppermint Patties? I say yes, and they give me 2. The proper quantity, minimum quantity, in which Peppermint Patties should be consumed is 40. Not 4, not 14, 40, 40. 40 at one sitting is the proper minimum portion for Peppermint Patties. So when hosts in the past have handed me 2, I never know what to do. I never know what to say. I force myself to say thank you. I suppose their heart's in the right place. But in terms of a book that's refreshing, my answer is nonfiction, and it's going to seem a little strange. But then again, a book that refreshes you is a purely personal thing, right? I'm not saying this book would refresh you. I'm saying it refreshes me. It's this thing. It's Books of the Century, which I almost do have within range of me. Nothing's within quite range. Well, I'm glad I have the covers then to show you. This is a big fat collection of book reviews from the New York Times Book Review over a century, over the course of a century, with all sorts of woodcuts by Barry Moser and with all sorts of editorial interpolations along the way. But the reviews are the main selling point here. You start off when the New York Times Book Review was not the New York Times Book Review. You start off when there was none of the cultural cachet that attaches to it as what it is now, the most prominent, most famous book review in the English-speaking world. And the reviews weren't signed in those early days, and a lot of them were very short, and a lot of them were very a la mode, so they didn't really feel like formal critical assessments of a book. And then I watch those forms, that attitude change as time goes on. It's spellbinding for me to watch, because this isn't just a history of book reviews as they've appeared in the New York Times. It's a history of book reviewing as a form, growing into its own genre, growing into its own form, quite a bit of which happened in public, in full view of the public, of the reading public. Quite a few of it happened on the fly. This never fails to perk me up. Again, I say, a book that refreshes you is going to be very personal, so that will change from person to person. Then number 8 is Dark Chocolate, a book with good romance. And here the young lovebirds in question are Edith Minturn and Isaac Phelps, both of whom came from a large amount of money. One way you can tell that's true is because they had their portrait painted by Sargent. And as I've mentioned many, many times on this channel, Sargent's paintings, his portraits are brilliant. He's, I think, the most brilliant portrait painter ever to work in paint, in the medium of paint. And almost every one of those portrait paintings deserves a book of its own. And Edith and Isaac got their own book. They got a book called Love Fiercely by Gene Zimmerman. A little thing here that it's not a long book. It's, I don't think, in print anymore. I don't know that it ever got a paperback edition, but it is wonderful. Just wonderful. It starts with a thoughtful examination of the Sargent painting. Notice the statements that Sargent makes in his painting. He always does, and they're always worth thinking about. Edith is far in the front. She's holding Isaac's straw hat. He has obviously just wandered in from outside. She's holding his hat at an angle, and look at the angle. And also her enormous white dress. All these things, and notice how you can't really tell from this is a cover photo on an iPad, but Isaac is sort of indistinct. She is brilliantly distinct in the forefront, and he is almost shadowy in the background. That is all the point that I want to make about Sargent's portraits, is that every single thing you're noticing about it was intensely intentional. And the book goes on from there. It tells her story, it tells his story, it tells their family stories, it tells the story of their relationship, and it's wonderful, just wonderful. I've gone back to it a few times, so I'm going to count it as a good romance. Then prompt number 9 is Peanut Butter Taffy. To tell you, a special book edition you own. Here I don't have any pictures to show you. I have 3 special editions of books that I have. I don't have them in any apartment. I have them in a safe deposit box in downtown Boston. They were gifts, and they are, each one of them, I'm pretty sure that a book collector would say they're fairly special. They aren't part of my working collection because that's just not how I think of books. I mean, I have all kinds of things here that I have editions that I found for 5 cents at a Goodwill that are lovingly annotated by their previous owner. Lots and lots of comments, but also jokes, quips, that sort of thing, so that by the time I'm done with a 1,000-page book or a 600-page book with those annotations, neatly in pencil, I not only have absorbed the book, but I feel like I know someone. I feel like I've started a snail mail correspondence. I have tons of editions like that. I have tons of special editions that are called so by the publisher. Like, for instance, I just got the companion to, last year there was a special edition of The Lord of the Rings with Tolkien's own artwork throughout. Lovely thing there were 2 different editions of that special edition. I got one of them from the publisher. I didn't get the fancier one. And I never bothered to get the fancier one either. And I just recently there's a companion volume coming out in November, I think, of the Silmarillion. also with Tolkien artwork. First time that's ever happened, as far as I know. Lovely, beautiful thing. That I suppose you could call a special edition, but I'm fairly easygoing when it comes to special editions. If like for instance, if a new Norton Critical edition of something is really good, I consider that a very special edition. So my definitions are all over the map here. And that ends the Halloween candy book tag, except to tag people. I want to tag everybody here. I don't have any specific people to tag. Anybody who hasn't done this, it's a fun one to do. And I also want to point out, just as a critic, just editorially speaking, I want to point out that this tag has no Hershey Kisses in it. It has no Hershey products, no Hershey bars of any kind, no Kit Kats. And perhaps worst of all, the worst omission from this tag, candy corn. Can we all agree on that if you're going to do a Halloween candy book tag, candy corn has to be on there. I would argue even more specifically than that chocolate-bottomed candy corn should be on there, since it's a well-known fact, I think it's in Deuteronomy, that although you can, if you want, have candy corn throughout the year, you can only have chocolate-bottomed candy corn at Halloween. That's not even on the list. It's not even here. Instead, we have, what was that horrifying thing? Caramel apple lollipop? I don't know what that is, and I don't want to know. But anyway, that's the Halloween candy book tag. I've got one other tag I want to do today. So I'll wrap this up and get to that, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.